The seventh in this series of 8 talks has within it a little fib, as it is actually not a talk that has anything to do with the London Z-Day 2013 event, but was one given with several other socially concerned groups in Portsmouth, England, called Crashonomics. Seeing as this was the Christmas edition of this event, the talk I gave that day used this festival as a lens by which to view both the problems inherent to our current socio-economic system, as well as presenting an alternative economic model that seeks to address the root cause of these issues. Therefore, the title of this presentation is A Festive Lens for a Sustainable Economy. As with any issue you are attempting to resolve, you have to know the scale of the problem you are dealing with, so let's start with wealth distribution across the human population. Currently, 1% of the world's population now owns 46% of the world's wealth. 50% live on less than $3 a day, 80% on less than 10, and 1/6 of this planet's human population are starving to death on less than $1.25 a day. And on an ecological level, we will need 2 Earths by 2030 to keep on our current rates of consumption. The last remaining rainforest could be consumed in less than 40 years. Species are going extinct at 1,000 times their normal rate due to human activity. Over 70% of the world's fish species are disappearing at an alarming rate due to overfishing. And 99% of the materials used in the process of manufacturing the goods on sale ends up as waste within 6 weeks. There is no little thing wrong here, to say the least. So it seems that more searching and rigorous questions need to be asked about our socio-economic system, rather than merely hoping for the next elected political party or leader to ride in and save the day. So let's start to examine these issues through our festive lens, starting off with Part 1, Cultural Control and Value Manipulation. I don't intend to spend much time going over the same tired debate you hear every year about the true meaning of Christmas. It should seem obvious to anyone with a pulse that Christmas is little more than a consumption festival. For example, in 2010, the UK spent £16.7 billion on Christmas, an astonishing amount that could feed the billion people starving to death on this planet for almost an entire year. With such rampant consumption on display, it seems hard to say that Christmas is about giving to those less fortunate than you and keep a straight face. But it was not always this way. Rampant materialism, that is the buying of products to make you happy, was not always a dominant cultural value set. Just after the First World War, industry was facing a huge leap in technological advancement and productivity, and therefore had a choice to make. Either it could slowly and strategically limit the working week and liberally apply this technological efficiency by doing more with less, or it could manipulate people's values by creating a false correlation between needs and wants and drive up consumption. No prizes for guessing which one they went for. We all claim that we are not being manipulated by advertising, and although this may be the case with regards to the purchase of the particular product or service being promoted at the time, the overall effect of living in a culture whereby the dominant psychological reinforcement of needing to appeal to people's vanity and narcissism through manipulative tactics to make a living means that no one who has to endure it is left completely unaffected. Take for example the employment by industry of Sigmund Freud's nephew Edward Bernays in the 1920s, who was brought in to help to decipher the tactics required to indoctrinate a culture towards consumption. He set to work to do just that. But don't take my word for it. Let's hear from the man himself, who said, "If we understand the mechanism and motives of the group mind, is it not possible to control and regiment the masses according to our will without their knowing about it?" One of the challenges for Bernays was how to get women to take up smoking to boost cigarette sales, which was until then a frowned upon practice. The way he did this was by attaching the smoking of cigarettes to the freedom being sought through the women's liberation movement. At a popular rally, he placed women strategically in the crowd, and at a certain point of high emotion, they revealed shirts adorning the phrase "Torches of Freedom," knowing full well that this would provide a fantastic picture opportunity for the watching press. And he was right, with the pictures and the subsequent advertising campaign playing on this message of smoking as a sign of the liberation of women from male dominance, helping to increase cigarette sales dramatically. Bringing the focus back to Christmas, did you know that Santa's suit used to be a whole host of colours, including green? This was until Coca-Cola instigated a marketing campaign to change the suit's colour to red, to correlate it to their product. This is one of the many examples of advertising's unseen effects on society and culture. It should be expected that the advertising world would seek out the very best mind manipulation techniques to help spearhead their campaigns. And for anyone to think that they can exist inside a culture predicated on using such tactics and remain unaffected by that value system that it perpetuates may be underestimating just how susceptible we all are to cultural influence. Because for all the harping on you hear about how awful consumption at Christmas is, it is extremely rare to find anyone who completely rejects its dictums. Even if we claim to not agree with the gross materialism on display at Christmas, most still go out and buy endless reams of crap to show each other how much we care. This goes some of the way to demonstrating how easily manipulated, malleable, and susceptible human behaviour is to cultural pressure. Herd mentality and the subsequent social ostracism that comes as a penalty for going against the cultural tide is perhaps a far more powerful behavioural control technique than all the courts, police, and prisons combined. The good news is that if we used to have different values and it is possible to manipulate culture, then it can also be turned around to a more beneficial one as well. Evidence of this can be found in a recent study in which it was found that if just 10% of the population holds an unshakable belief, their belief will be adopted by the majority. Not that I am advocating blind obedience or herd mentality, or even that anyone should believe anything on the basis of cultural sway. Far from it. I am merely pointing out that the old adage that things will never change is to perform a flagrant disregard for the only truth we have ever come to know of, and that is that things always have and always will change. What we change is up to us. If we have no clear understanding of the underlying cause behind the problems we are seeking to address, or the direction in which we could head to address them, then we will see little lasting and positive change. This shows that if we can initiate a change in the prevailing belief that the current system is in any way capable of meeting our sustainability goals, then this will make it far easier to discuss an alternative economic model and initiate the shift in values needed to support it. Part 2. The true meaning of Christmas. This is apparently about giving to those less fortunate than you. The implication here being that the best we can ever hope for to solve the issue of poverty is via charity. Whilst you would have to be a sociopath to disagree with the notion of empathy attached to the cause of charitable endeavour, it does in fact conceal a far more revealing aspect of our current socio-economic system's functionality, and that is that it doesn't. In fact, it is actually the most powerful stimulant we could create for nearly all the problems in our world, from environmental degradation, poverty, crime, inequality, and war. So the title of this section, If the True Meaning of Christmas is Properly Employed, should include an addendum, that being, Is System Failure? Charity is the ultimate admittance of fundamental structural flaws to our socio-economic system. If your social system purports that it is there to meet human needs and then says that it requires charity to meet the needs of most of its inhabitants, then it is clearly not fit for purpose. It is not simple enough to blame the 1%, human greed or corruption. Our system is the corruption. It has just taken this long for its internal dynamics to create the vast ecocide, growing income inequality and escalating collapse sequences that we have witnessed in recent years. This claim must of course be substantiated, but before I do there is something I should mention before going on, and that is that all our associative memory patterns, emotional dispositions and values were groomed in this culture. This can make it very difficult, if not almost impossible, to see its systemic flaws, as well as the merits of a new one. Regardless of the evidence presented, if you decide that there are some things that are unquestionable, then you may as well stop this presentation here. But if you are still watching, then remember that many a renowned philosopher offered all manner of contemplations and astute moral and ethical observations for his time, and yet seemed oblivious to the now obvious inhumanity of the slave trade. The same could be said of when we used to believe the earth was flat and the centre of the universe. It needs to be appreciated that it is extremely hard for us to question absolutely everything about the culture in which we were reared. But considering the gravity of the problems we now face, we must leave no stone unturned and question absolutely everything about our socio-economic system with as open a mind as possible, whilst equally being wary of fraudulent claims and faulty information, including everything that you hear in this presentation. So let's start to unpick the core attributes of our current socio-economic paradigm. The current method of meeting human need is a combination of business and politics, but both of these cannot function without a much more important feature: money. Money was brought about to enable the trade of scarce goods or services, with producers engaging in competition with each other to offer the most efficient product to consumers. This was, of course, a necessary step for humanity to take, as it was more efficient than barter and helped to increase the complexity of trade in the marketplace. However, it did bring with it a certain amount of baggage, that is the need for scarcity and, as a consequence, competition. The inherent premise of competition is that there must be winners and losers. If stepped back from, the gaming strategy inherent to our current system is easy to discern. Whether it is the control of the money supply by private interests and not the government, as is now the case, corporate dominance, governmental and political corruption, monopolistic collusion, or growing income inequality, all should be expected symptomatic outcomes of a system based explicitly on seeking and maintaining differential advantage. The creation of money by private interests out of debt, with interest applied, is not some anomaly of the system. It is the system. In this practice, scarcity is actually built into the money supply itself, further exasperating the need to compete for labour, meaning someone somewhere will take less wages and poorer working conditions. Even if all this debt were to be repaid back to the banks tomorrow, we would still owe the interest, which means that the debt will never, ever be paid off. It's a pyramid scheme which creates hierarchy in society, further exasperating income inequality. I think this diagram depicts it better than I ever could. This tendency towards preserving established interests and self-maximization has certain self-defeating qualities that are unavoidable when the need to maintain a competitive advantage is taken into account. For if Company A in a particular field starts to automate, decreasing its dependence on human labour, then Company B must do the same. This phenomenon could be referred to as technological unemployment and is the biggest threat to the job market there is. Technological efficiency is increasing exponentially, meaning that jobs that we would never have thought of as being able to be done by machines soon will be. The question is that with the vast majority of jobs being increasingly done by machines, who is going to have the income from labour to keep the system going? Because consumption, or more accurately cyclical consumption, is what our entire system needs to keep functioning. The faster money can be pumped in and circulated, the greater our so-called economic health. Wait a second though, I thought the definition of economy was to economise. So surely, having a system that measures its health based on how fast it wastes its finite resources cannot claim to be economic, can it? Surely anti-economy would be a more fitting title, would it not? Scarcity is the great driver behind all of this, because if something is abundant, then you can't charge money for it. One way in which this manifests is in intrinsic obsolescence, which is the making of goods with inferior materials and techniques to cut corners on costs and remain competitive by appealing to someone lower in the financial ladder. And a more insidious example would be planned obsolescence, which is when things are deliberately made to break down to turn over a profit from a faster resale. Both speed up cyclical consumption, so they are positively rewarded attributes in the market's insane quest for infinite growth on a finite planet. We should not really be all that surprised by any of this. Of course the rich elite would seek to control the means of wealth generation. If I'm playing Monopoly, then I want to be the banker, or own more property and force you out of the game. So why should the real-world version of Death Monopoly be any different? It's too simple to say that it is all the greedy bankers' fault. They are just the best at playing the game we all endorse with our collective social values and behaviour. It is more our fault for continuing to agree to play it with them, as if there is no one for them to play with, then there is no game. But surely things have to be this way, because we do not have the resources or technological capability to create and access abundance to meet human needs on a global level, right? Wrong. And this brings us to part 3. A true Christmas economy. Christmas comes but once a year, but it doesn't have to. There is now actually no reason why the coming together of family and friends and the sharing of abundance has to be reserved to just once a year, and for only the upper echelons of society. It can be an everyday activity for every man, woman and child on this planet. The economic model that can deliver this could be called a natural law resource-based economy, or NLRBE for short, the definition of which is the application of the scientific method for social concern. So what would make this better than all other systems before it? Well, put simply, it's the decision-making method it uses, that being the scientific method. If the methods of science were applied directly to every aspect of our social system, then it could finally end the need to rely on outdated modes of decision-making such as politics, monetary-based economics, and business. These systems are not going to deliver in terms of a decision-making process by which all humanity can unite to face these challenges, because they are established systems rather than emergent ones. We would be arriving at decisions in such an economic model instead of making them subjectively. So what's the difference between arriving at a decision and making one? Take a plot of land. 4 families live on the plot of land and they decide to plant a fruit tree for food. Which one of these positions is the best place to plant the tree? A, B, C or D? You'd think B, right? Well, in this figurative example, at least it's actually D. You see, the scientific method states that you have to take into account all the known variables that interact on the tree's ability to produce a high amount of food. So that's the pH level of the soil, the best place for irrigation, sunlight, and so on. You can decide the best form of distribution in much the same way. It's a ground-up approach to decision-making rather than a top-down version like we have today. It would be easy to dismiss such a proposal without a proper appreciation of our current technological capability or an understanding of the root cause of aberrant behaviour. But if we are serious about resolving these issues, then we must base our method of approach towards addressing these issues based upon observable evidence without self-interest, opinion or ego getting in the way. Or we will be condemned to repeat past mistakes over and over again. For example, whether it is a 99% reduction in the space needed to cultivate more food organically using hydroponic vertical food farms, the producing of fresh drinking water that can be extracted from the air around you, travelling long distance at speeds of up to 4,000 miles an hour safely via magnetically levitated high-speed trains that use just 2% the energy of planes and none of the dirty emissions, or the 4,000 years of clean energy available beneath our feet via geothermal energy, to mention nothing of the amazing potential of solar, wind, wave and tidal to provide mankind's energy needs many times over. The fact is that we can easily cater for the needs of every human being on this planet many times over, raising the standard of living so high that the rich of today will look like paupers in comparison. But there is no money in producing an abundance like this, so it will be restricted by design or default at every turn. Whether it is in the use of patents, laws, lobbying, monopolistic collusion, taxes, or just good old-fashioned force, any noble aim we have to bring about sustainability, peace, collaboration, and access abundance on a global scale is simply impossible whilst immersed in a system predicated on preserving waste, war, competition, scarcity, and inefficiency. I am sorry, but this system has to go, along with the values that support it. Part 4. Christmas as a transitional tool. I refuse to accept that charity and the engaging in perpetual class war is the way that things will always be, just because that's the way they always have been. Not now that there's an alternative available. So if the Christmas message is to love your neighbour as yourself, then let's do this by our actions, not our words. Not by charity, but by implementing a system that obviates the need for it. Will it be perfect? No. It will just be a damn sight better than what we have today, but only if we are prepared to shift our values accordingly. This sentiment was summed up rather succinctly by Mahatma Gandhi when he said, "We but mirror the world. All the tendencies presented in the outer world are to be found in the world of our body. If we could change ourselves, the tendencies in the world would also change. As a man changes his own nature, so does the attitude of the world change towards him. This is the divine mystery supreme. A wonderful thing it is, and the source of our happiness. We need not wait to see what others do." Or more succinctly, with the cultural filter of several amendments applied, be the light of change you wish to see in the world. But every journey starts with a small step, taken by those willing to stand out and say enough is enough. Most lasting and beneficial social change has always come from the people. The empowering aspect of this notion is that if it is our values and behaviour that support this system and we can change them, then we can change the world. I, for one, do not want to live in a world where every new human being who sets foot on this earth is told that even with all the wonders that modern technology can provide, that they still have to earn their right to life on this planet. I want to welcome them by letting them know that their needs on spaceship Earth will be taken care of. I want to welcome them to a world in which they will want to contribute without the need to coerce them into doing so, because they can see that in a system that is actually there to meet their needs, that it benefits them and everyone else to contribute to it positively. Of course people have to be coerced to take part in our current system. Who would willingly contribute to a system that produces this? One that spends in just 8 days on war what it would cost to feed every starving person on this planet for a year. I refuse to accept that this is the best we can do. Of course, getting to the stage of being able to welcome new human beings to this earth in such a manner is no easy task, but anything worth doing was always hard. It is nigh on impossible to lay down any concrete transition plan with so many variables at play, and most importantly, without the much needed shift in our values to support it. But just because we don't know how to get from A to B does not resolve the need to do so. At least there is a B. One cultural tool that could be useful in this transition is the Christmas festival itself. With enough effort, what Christmas professes to be about could spread virally online. This is why I have set up a Facebook campaign called The First Christmas. The First Christmas is a visual campaign via Facebook for those who wish to spread the true meaning of Christmas. The idea is to add this badge to your Facebook profile picture, letting people know that if they are stuck for what to get you this year, then you would prefer it if they gave to a charity of your choice instead. After all, the real gift is in the giving. The idea of the campaign is to get just 10% of the population of Facebook to join it, tipping the balance of cultural swing towards creating what could be truly referred to as the First Christmas. Whilst this may not address the underlying causes behind the need for charity, it does create a gift economy mentality in the general zeitgeist of our culture. The good feeling that comes with such a wave of giving could help to create a more fertile ground for people to consider the needs of others, helping themselves to realize that the competitive me attitude that is rife in society today is not only emotionally unsatisfying, but it is in fact detrimental to our personal and collective well-being as well. So please do join the campaign and learn more about the proposed alternative of a natural law resource-based economy online. Because for a long time now, the world's religious leaders, philosophers and writers have been proposing notions of how the world can become a more peaceful, happy and joyful place in which for us all to live. But the ability to technically achieve the abundance required for such a globally collaborative system was never a reality until now. We've achieved so much as a species, and to our knowledge are the greatest evolutionary success story this universe has ever created. Quite simply, we are amazing, and together there is nothing we can't achieve. We've changed before, and we can do it again, but not without effort. So I'm afraid the first change has to start with you, not someone else. In the final analysis, we are one people, and we share one planet.